Hello. So I get asked a lot about ISO 27001 internal audits, how to conduct them, how frequently do they need to be done, how do I maintain impartiality, etc., etc. So I thought I'd cover a few of these basic questions with a rapid run through. It points you in the right direction if you want to conduct an internal audit yourself. First up then is the audit and what its purpose is. The reason that we're conducting the audit is because it's like a dress rehearsal before you go through to your main audit, an external audit with an external accredited organisation that then come and look at you in minute detail. You want to make sure that when you go through to the audit, that it's a good use of everybody's time and that you're confident going into it, that it is where you need to be. So you're checking two things to make sure that you're compliant. One is that you are conforming to the 27001 requirements as laid out in the standard. And the second is that you are adhering to your own rules. So if you've created a policy or procedure that says we will do this, then we're checking that is indeed done. The second half of what we're checking is that all of this that you've put in place is being effective. So that there is evidence and reports that show that it's been consistent and that you can measure whether it's having a beneficial impact on the system and your security. So there's an old mantra in auditing, and it is say what you can, do what you say, and then prove it. So that you are basically saying, this is how we're going to lay out our policies and procedures. We're going to go off and do it, and then we're going to prove that we have done it. Audits are usually conducted at planned intervals according to 27001. So it's not saying that you need to do it every 6 months or every year. But if you look at the way that most auditors work, which is on a 3-year cycle from certification to recertification, and then you have the surveillance audits that are looking at selections of controls in between, then you could wisely adopt that kind of approach yourself and say that I'm going to internally audit in detail once every 3 years prior to my main audit. But between that, I'm going to selectively look at certain areas of the security management system and do it that way. But it is entirely down to you to define what's appropriate, so long as it's planned and you're saying how frequently and how you're going to go about it. So you need to lay down an audit program or a plan that says what the frequency is going to be, what your methods are going to be, how you're going to go about it, where the staff and responsibilities are going to come from. So who's doing what in the audit. And then you're laying out the plans and the schedule for your audit, and then how you can report back on your findings. So findings need to be evidence-based. We're looking at records, tickets, logs, even screenshots of systems, and then approval cycles and documents, making sure that any policies and procedures have been reviewed and approved. And then things like meeting minutes from management meetings are also a good source of evidence, but they can come from a variety of places to support showing that you are doing what you said that you can do in your original plans. What we're really looking for is traceability. So if you look at a requirement, then you want evidence that shows you're meeting that requirement. And then from that evidence, you can reach a conclusion. It's working well, it's not working well, we've skipped some things. And then you might take corrective action after that to say, oh, maybe if we change this, we can make an improvement. When we're looking at an internal audit, we want to make sure that we're being clear in our planning about what's in scope. We would look at the ISMS scope for sure to help start with that and make sure that we've got a good understanding as part of the audit itself, that we're looking at the right systems, the correct processes, business functions, the sites, the teams and the suppliers that all need to be involved. So we might look at the help desk, we might look at the finance team or the HR team and conduct interviews with those people, just to make sure that they're contributing effectively. And we want to make sure that our criteria is clear. So what are we measuring against? Well, we're measuring against the ISO clauses, any policies and procedures that we've outlined how we're going to go about things, the statement of applicability and the controls of Annex A, certainly those controls that have been deemed to be within scope, and then potentially any other supporting contracts and things like that might be necessary to review for external provisions. The audit program in itself then we said needs to be at planned intervals, and we need to be clear about its method, who's owning it, where it's being reported to. And it also says in the standard that it can be based on the importance of some of the controls and also the past results. We might look at previous audits that have been conducted to make sure that non-compliances or opportunities for improvement, for example, have been addressed. So when we are planning our 27001 internal audit, you might say, I'm going to break it into pieces. I'm not going to do all in one go. I might do a bit this month, a bit next month. It's entirely up to you, but you really should take what is considered a realistic slice. For example, I might just look at the clauses 4 to 8, or I might just look at the risks this month, but we're taking a realistic slice of the 27001, saying, okay, let's look at that first. And then looking at the evidence, so might pre-request some policies and procedures around that are sent over to us so that we can look at that first before we start asking questions and looking at evidence. We might also want to book in short interviews with people where we deem evidence is required. So it might be a subject matter expert from HR, for example, when we're talking about the hiring process and the background checks and things like that. Or it might be somebody on the help desk just to check that they know where the policies and procedures are or what to do in case of an incident. And then you need to define how you're going to record your results. So where you can put them, what's that feedback going to look like when you've finished with your report. When looking at findings and creating your report, it would be sensible to adhere to the standard that most external auditors are using. And they would typically use non-conformities, both major and minor, opportunities for improvement, and then observations. So a major non-conformity is where you're not meeting the intent of the standard. For example, there's a major missing component, like you've got no risk management, no statement of applicability, no documented scope, no continual improvement process. There's something, a big structural element missing. That would be a major non-conformity. A minor non-conformity might be that something slightly out of date. You have some records, but they're a bit scatty, and you can see that something's missing there. So it's a bit inconsistent. So you've got your major and minor non-conformities, and you might want to group things like that. And then you've got opportunities for improvement. Opportunities for improvement are areas where you potentially are meeting the requirement, but it could be done better. You might make a recommendation that something is reviewed more frequently, or the way in which incidents are recorded is slightly scatty. So you might say, can we make sure incidents are recorded consistently against certain criteria or something like that? So it is an area where they are meeting the standard, but you are saying, actually, I think we could do a little bit better in that area. And then you've got observations, which are purely things where you are saying, hey, it's just an observation, it's just my thought, but maybe you could do this or you could do that. You could bring in AI, or it's simply a person's perspective, and it's not a failure of any kind. It's just looking at improvements. Now, the audit needs to be impartial and objective, which is very difficult in small businesses because the person that's auditing might even be the person that set up the ISMS. Now, in pure ISO 27001 terms, the standard says that's really a no-no. However, you can potentially consider ways in which you can evidence the objectivity and impartiality that the standard is requesting from your internal audit. Effectively, is saying, don't try and mark your own homework. And that's fair enough, isn't it? But that's not necessarily practical in all small businesses. So here's some options. You can always train someone, like a junior member of staff, make sure that they've got the right training, they understand 27001, and then get them to review it so that you have somebody that didn't set the system up, but is coming to it with fresh eyes, and then they review it and give you some findings. However, they might be a bit overwhelmed if they are a junior member of staff, but it could be a good stretch or growth thing. You could audit between teams. So, for example, HR could audit some of the IT processes and IT audit HR's processes. So there's some kind of demarcation and separation between the two, so that there's some objectivity can be demonstrated. You can potentially, in a very small business, and it's down to you to argue this with an external auditor, but you might say, I'm going to undertake a review, but I'm going to have it signed off by my manager who's going to challenge me. Even though I'm the person that set up the ISMS and I'm the person auditing it, I'm going to present those results back to my manager, and they're going to sign off that they believe it has been objective and they've asked all the right questions. So that's potentially a way, but also a potential bear pit if you fall into it, especially if you're in there with an auditor from one of the more seasoned organisations out there who might say that isn't objective enough. But that will come down to an arm wrestle between you and the auditor. And of course, you could, if you've got a company that you trust that you work with, you could swap homework with them and they could audit your system and you audit theirs. But a lot of people wouldn't ever want to entertain that. Then, of course, there is the option of using someone like myself. You can bring an external consultant or resource in to audit your system, which is probably the cleanest, quickest way to do it, to give you the greatest confidence in your system. Because if you built it yourself and then you're auditing yourself, you might think you've met the standard, but it's not really a good place to be objective from. And you might find that there's some things that you have overlooked. So using an external resource can be beneficial for a number of reasons, and just tick that box confidence-wise and objectivity-wise. What good looks like then, in terms of outcomes and outputs from an audit, you're going to want to make sure that you have like an audit pack that you can hand to the management and use for follow-up and review and results. ISO expects documented information from the audit program and audit results and reporting to the relevant management. And that would include typically the audit program, the audit method, responsibilities, the audit plan, notes from your audit, the findings from your audits and non-conformities, opportunities for improvement, those kind of things. And then a corrective action log that then closes off any non-conformities before you go through to the main external audit. You do want to try and keep it simple. You want to keep it consistent, and you want it repeatable so you can do it again in the future in exactly the same way so that you get consistent results. If you need help running your internal audit, I'm here. There are others out there as well. And I can help remove the bias. I can speed up evidence collection and give you much more confidence in your rehearsal for your certification process. And by all means, you can book in to discuss that with me if you'd like. But I hope there's enough information here and supporting documents in the information security toolkit that I have published that you can go about conducting an internal audit yourself with some confidence. I hope that helps.